this video we will look at special types or multi-step inequalities. And this first video will just look up through examples H. In example H, after that there are some special solutions that will be talked about in a separate video. Once again, you will solve these inequalities the exact same way you solve the equations. So that never changes. The only thing you need to be careful of is if we end up multiplying or dividing both sides by a negative number. If we do, then we need to remember to flip the inequality like we talked about in 3(2) and 3(3). So our first step here to solve this inequality is we're going to subtract 9 from both sides. So when we do that, we end up with 4t is greater than 12. And to get the t by itself, we're going to divide both sides by 4. And when we do that, we end up with t is greater than 3. And now, we did not flip the inequality because we divided both sides by a positive number. So, to graph the solutions, we have an open circle at 3 since it's not greater than or equal to, it's just greater than, so we have an open circle. Test the point, is 2 greater than 3? The answer is no. So then we shade to the right. In our second inequality, we will start by adding 7 to both sides, just like we would with the equations. So then when we do that, we have negative 6a is less than or equal to 24. And then we will divide both sides by negative 6. Now, be very careful. Since we are dividing both sides by negative 6, we need to flip the inequality so it becomes greater than or equal to, just like we talked about in section 3(2) and 3(3). And 24 divided by negative 6 is, of course, negative 4. So then to graph this on the number line, being very careful of how we order these numbers. Make sure it's negative 5, negative 4, negative 3. And since it's greater than or equal to, we will have a closed circle at negative 4. Pick a point. Is negative 5 greater than or equal to negative 4? The answer is no. So then we shade away from negative 4. In our next inequality, we are going to first subtract 5, just like we would with the equation. So we're left with negative 9 less than negative 3n. Then we divide by negative 3. Now, since we divide both sides by negative 3, we need to flip the inequality. Negative 9 divided by negative 3 is positive 3. And we're left with n there. So we have 2, 3, and 4. We would have an open circle at 3. Test a point. Like 2. Is 3 greater than 2? The answer is yes. So we will shade then in the direction of 2. In D, we would start off by subtracting 30. And then we are left with 20 is greater than 0.8x. And finally, we would divide by 0.8. Now, in this case, we will not flip the inequality because we're dividing both sides by a positive number. So then, on this side, we are left with x. 20 divided by 0.8. That's dividing by 4/5 or multiplying by 5/4, which is 25. So then to graph the solution to this inequality, we will have an open circle at 25 because it's just greater than. Test the point. like 24. Is 25 greater than 24? The answer is yes. So therefore, we would shade in that direction. Now, E and F, a little bit more complicated. First thing we would do is distribute the 3 in E. 3t plus 3 minus 4t is greater than or equal to negative 5. Combine the like terms to get negative 1t plus 3 greater than or equal to negative 5. Then we subtract the 3. We have negative 1t is greater than or equal to negative 8. Then we divide by negative 1. So therefore, we have to flip the inequality symbol because we're dividing both sides by a negative value. So t is less than or equal to 8. We would have a closed circle at 8. Plug in 7 to test. Is 7 less than or equal to 8? The answer is yes. So we would shade that direction. Same thing here. Here we will distribute the negative 2. Be very careful. You should not combine the 5 minus 2 first, then distribute. The only thing that gets distributed is the negative 2. So when we do that, we end up with negative 8m minus 14. Combine those two like terms, so we have 15 is less than or equal to negative 9 minus 8m. And we add 9. So therefore, 24 is less than or equal to negative 8m. And then we divide both sides by negative 8. And since we're dividing both sides by a negative value, we need to flip that inequality. So we have negative 3 is greater than or equal to m. Then to graph, let's be very careful of how we order our numbers since we're dealing with negatives. We should have a closed circle in negative 3. Plug in negative 4. Negative 3 is greater than or equal to negative 4. Therefore, we shade that direction. And then finally, G and H. And in both of these, we have a variable on both sides. So our first job is to get that variable on one side of the equation. And so I will subtract 3n from both sides. When we do that, we have 3n minus 1 is greater than 8. And then we can add 1 to both sides. So 3n is greater than 9. Just to stay with it, I'll write that in blue. Bugs me when I write in the wrong color, so that's why I changed that. And then we divide both sides by 3. Now, since we're dividing both sides by a positive value, we do not flip the inequality, so it stays greater than. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So then to graph this, we would have an open circle at 3. Test 2 is 2 greater than 3. The answer is no, so we will shade the opposite direction, away from 2. And finally, for this video, H, we add 2b. And we are left with 5b plus 12 is greater than 27. And we subtract the 12, just following the same steps we would for equations. So therefore, 5b is greater than 15. And then we divide by 5. So since we divide both sides by a positive value, the inequality does not change, and we're left with b is greater than 3, just like we had over here. So to graph this, we have 2, 3, and 4. Open circle at 3. Shading to the right, because if we tested 2, 2 is not greater than 3, so we shade away. In the next video, we'll look at some special cases when solving these multi-step inequalities.